Old Zaccheaus, he was a fool. I know he was rich. He was a tax collector after all, and a chief tax collector, so he had plenty of money. Zaccheaus was always trying to be a big man around town. Which is kind of ironic because he was just a little guy. He was short. He was always strutting around trying to make a big impression on people and dragging people into court to make them pay their taxes. But Zaccheaus, he was a fool. Anyway, that day when Jesus of Nazareth came to town, old Zaccheaus was trying to see him. He was jumping up and down behind the crowd, trying to see over their heads, and he couldn't see because he was so small. It was ridiculous. And then he ran on ahead up the road to get ahead of the crowd, and he was running along there, his little legs chugging along, and his robes flapping him. He looked silly. And then he climbed a sycamore tree that had a branch hanging out over the road, and his robes were hanging down, and his sandals were dangling, and his little fat belly was clinging on to that branch, and his arms were holding on as tight as he could. He just looked ridiculous. He was a fool. And then when Jesus saw him up there, and Jesus said to him, "Zaccheaus, come down from that tree." Zaccheaus scrambled down just like a little kid, walked up to Jesus, and when Jesus told him that he was going to stay at his house, he fell all over himself to welcome Jesus. I mean, what a fool. Now, I admit that old Zach, he changed that day. From that day on, he stopped shaking people down. Now he's an honest tax collector. And I know that's hurt his revenue. He gives away half of his income to people in need, and he paid back everybody he cheated 4 times. So I admit, he's changed. You know, when old Zach met Jesus that day, something in him changed. He said, "Jesus saw right through my soul." I didn't know Zach even had a soul. What I want to know is what happened to Zach? Did his guilt over cheating people all those years kind of catch up to him? Or did he all of a sudden get religion and want to be religious all of a sudden? Or did he just want to please Jesus, make a big impression on him? Or did God grab hold of him and just shake some sense into him? I don't know. I guess it shows one thing. Rich people can change. Even people like Zaccheaus, that old fool, can change and can become a generous person. Jesus called him a son of Abraham. I guess that's right. Well, that's the story of Zaccheaus, the little man who climbed up the sycamore tree. And before he met Jesus, he was small-minded and stingy. You know, he was a little man, not just in stature, but also spiritually. But in his mind, he was a big person. You know, he was an important person. He had a pretty high view of himself. He had this big inflated ego. And so he was looking down on other people. And Jesus had to call him to come down to earth. He says, you know, Zaccheaus, you're just an ordinary person, just like everybody else. So bring yourself down to the level of everybody else. You know, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Something about Jesus inspired Zaccheaus to become a generous person, a better person. That day his ego shrank, but his heart grew about 3 sizes, I think. And Jesus said, "Today salvation has come to this house." Well, I think that salvation isn't just about having your sins forgiven or somehow being saved from your guilt. I think salvation means being made whole, being made complete. And that's what happened to Zaccheaus that day. He was made whole when he met Jesus, and he showed it by being a more generous person. I heard this story about this man who had a bunch of plans for retirement. In addition to his regular retirement funds, he had set aside a bank account that he added to every year for travel when he retired. His wife wasn't interested in traveling, but he wanted to travel. He wanted to go trekking in Scotland and go to the Casbahs in Morocco. He wanted to sit on the sidewalk cafe in Paris and watch the people go by. So he was building up his travel fund so he could do this. He and his wife had a 10-year-old daughter. One day she came home from school and says, I'm going to be in the Christmas play at school, and we need a Santa Claus. We're raising money to help homeless kids who don't have anything for Christmas. And his wife said, oh, honey, you ought to be Santa Claus. You'd be great at that. He says, no way. No way am I going to be Santa Claus. His daughter said, oh, come on, Daddy, please. So his wife and his daughter kept after him, and finally he agreed to do it. As the time came closer for the Christmas play, he started to get nervous. He says, I'm no Santa Claus. Who am I to act like Santa Claus? I don't even like Santa Claus. His wife said, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. So, day of the Christmas pageant comes. He puts on the Santa suit and the fake beard. And his wife says, yeah, I don't even recognize you. Nobody's going to even know it's you. He said, that's just fine with me then. So the pageant came off just fine, no problems. He comes home, he takes off his Santa suit, takes off the beard, says, whew, I'm glad that's over. His wife said, it wasn't so bad, was it? He said, no, actually I kind of enjoyed it. And I gave away all my travel fund to the homeless kids. She said, you did what? He said, I gave away my travel fund to the fund for the homeless kids. She said, honey, why did you do that? You weren't supposed to be Santa Claus. You were just supposed to play Santa Claus. He said, well, I couldn't help it. When you put on the Santa Claus suit, you become Santa Claus. And actually, I feel pretty good about it. I think I'm a better person for it. I think today, on that day, salvation came to that house.